My brothers and sisters, let me tell you about the night that changed everything in Uganda's power struggle. The night of January 23, 2026, when armed soldiers stormed the home of opposition leader Bobi Wine while he was in hiding. And what they did to his wife Barbie in that house will make your blood run cold. But before I reveal the full horror of what happened, before I show you the documented evidence that proves every word of this story, I need to know if you're truly committed to understanding what's happening in Africa right now. Because if you are, then subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to show you reveals the brutal reality of power in East Africa. And this story needs to reach every corner of our continent. It needs to be seen by every person who cares about democracy, human rights, and the future of African politics. What happened on that Friday night wasn't random and it wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of a public manhunt that had been escalating for days. A manhunt announced on social media by one of the most powerful men in Uganda, General Muhoozi, the son of President Yoweri Museveni, and the chief of Uganda's defense forces, a man who commands thousands of soldiers, who controls vast resources, who has been groomed for decades to inherit his father's presidency, and continue a military dynasty that has ruled Uganda since 1986. And what makes this story even more chilling is that everything I'm about to tell you was documented in real time, posted publicly on social media platforms where millions could see it, witnessed by neighbors who heard the screaming, and saw the military vehicles, and reported by credible media sources including international news agencies. So this isn't speculation or rumor, this isn't conspiracy theory or propaganda, this is documented fact, verified by multiple independent sources. And by the end of this video you'll understand why this moment represents something bigger than one politician or one country. This is about the future of democracy across the entire African continent. About whether military dynasties will continue to rule through fear and violence, or whether a new generation demanding accountability and representation will finally break through. Let me take you back to January 15, 2026, Election Day in Uganda, when millions of Ugandans went to the polls in a presidential election that international observers called deeply flawed before voting even began. The official results declared incumbent President Yoweri Museveni the winner with 71.65% of the vote. That's 7,946,772 votes according to Uganda's Electoral Commission, while opposition candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, better known as Bobi Wine, secured 24.72%, with 2,741,238 votes. Now on paper these results show a landslide victory for Museveni, the kind of overwhelming mandate that would suggest massive popular support. But anyone who's been following Ugandan politics knows the reality on the ground tells a very different story. A story of ballot boxes being stuffed in the middle of the night, of opposition polling agents being prevented from observing vote counts, of internet shutdowns designed to prevent citizens from sharing evidence of fraud, of voters being turned away from polling stations in opposition strongholds, while government supporters faced no such obstacles. Bobi Wine and his National Unity Platform party immediately rejected these results, citing widespread irregularities that independent observers documented across the country. And this rejection wasn't based on emotion or sore losing. It was based on specific documented evidence that the NUP had been collecting for weeks, leading up to the election, and on election day itself. We're talking about voter register manipulation, where opposition supporters found their names mysteriously removed from voting rolls, about pre-ticked ballot papers discovered before polls even opened, about military personnel voting multiple times at different locations, about results being announced before counting was complete, about polling stations in opposition areas reporting impossible statistics that indicated clear fraud. The European Union Observer Mission noted serious irregularities, Human Rights Watch documented systematic voter intimidation, and local civil society organizations reported that official results didn't match their data from polling stations across the country. Now here's where things get dangerous, where a disputed election transforms into a life-or-death struggle. In the days following the election, Bobi Wine began organizing protests and calling for investigations into the electoral fraud, using his massive social media following to share evidence of irregularities, coordinating with his party to file legal challenges, and mobilizing the young people who make up the majority of Uganda's population, and who overwhelmingly support his movement for change. And this is when General Muhoozi, the president's son, and the man widely expected to succeed his father in what would be one of Africa's few military dynasties passing from father to son, decided to go public with threats that shocked even people familiar with Uganda's authoritarian politics. Threats that crossed lines that hadn't been crossed so publicly before. On January 20th, just 5 days after the election, Muhoozi posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, from his verified account that has hundreds of thousands of followers, and I quote directly from screenshots that have been preserved and verified by multiple media outlets. "We have killed 22 NUP terrorists since last week." Let that sink in for a moment. A sitting general, the army chief of a sovereign nation, publicly bragging about killing members of the opposition party, calling them terrorists, without any trials or evidence or legal process, not even pretending there was due process, not even offering the fig leaf of claiming they were armed or dangerous, just a flat declaration that the military had killed opposition party members, and framing it as an achievement to be celebrated. This wasn't a private conversation leaked to the press. This wasn't an off-the-record comment caught on a hot mic. This was a public post on social media intended for maximum visibility, designed to send a message not just to Bobi Wine, but to every single person who supported him or thought about supporting him. But Muhoozi didn't stop there, and this is important to understand because it shows the escalation, the way these threats built from general violence against unnamed NUP members to a specific targeted manhunt against Bobi Wine himself. He followed up with another post that took things to a new level. "We are most certainly hunting Bobi. And let me explain that Bobi is a derogatory nickname that Muhoozi uses for Bobi Wine, a way of diminishing him, of stripping away his dignity. He is wanted dead or alive." And then came the ultimatum that would set everything in motion. "I'm giving him exactly 48 hours to surrender himself to the police." Think about what this means, my brothers and sisters. Think about the implications of the army chief of a sovereign nation, publicly declaring an opposition politician wanted dead or alive, using the language of Old West bounty hunters, using phrases that come from American cowboy movies, not from constitutional democracy, turning social media into a platform for state-sponsored terrorism, and doing it all with the confidence of someone who believes he's completely untouchable, who believes that no law applies to him, who believes that his father's power and his control of the military means he can say anything and do anything without consequences. This is what impunity looks like. This is what happens when military officers believe they own the state and can treat citizens as enemies to be hunted rather than people to be served. Bobi Wine went into hiding immediately because he understood that Muhoozi's threats were deadly serious, that this wasn't political theater or empty bluster, that when the army chief says you're wanted dead or alive, he means exactly that. According to multiple reports from Ugandan media outlets and international journalists who have been covering this story, Bobi Wine moved locations constantly during those 48 hours, and the days that followed, never staying in one place for more than a few hours, relying on a network of trusted supporters who helped him move between safe houses, avoiding his normal haunts and his family home in Magjer, disconnecting from his regular communication channels, essentially going dark while his lawyers and party officials tried to navigate the legal and political crisis this created. And let me tell you something about what it means to go into hiding in your own country, to be hunted by your own government's military, to know that the soldiers who are supposed to protect you are instead searching for you with orders from the president's son to bring you in dead or alive. You can't see your family because that puts them at risk. You can't trust most of your friends because you don't know who might be compromised or surveilled. You can't use your phone normally because intelligence services are tracking every call. You can't move freely in public because checkpoints are looking for you. You become a ghost in your own land. And all of this because you committed the terrible crime of running for president, of asking for democracy, of believing that Uganda's constitution, which supposedly guarantees political rights, actually means something. Share this video everywhere right now, because what I'm about to tell you next is documented by eyewitnesses, medical reports, and Bobi Kyagulanyi's own testimony given to journalists. And it reveals the brutal tactics that authoritarian regimes use when they can't silence their opponents directly, when the person they're hunting proves too elusive, so they target the people he loves instead. So share this video, post it to every platform you have, send it to every group chat, because the world needs to see what happened on the night of January 23rd, 2026, because this is the kind of abuse that thrives in darkness, and only stops when exposed to light. It was late Friday night, January 23rd, the 48-hour deadline Muhoozi had announced had already passed days earlier with no sign of Bobi Wine surrendering. And the frustration in security circles was apparently growing because their target kept evading them. And that's when neighbors in Magjer heard the sound of multiple vehicles pulling up to Bobi Wine's family compound, doors slamming, boots hitting the ground, and then dozens of men in military uniform pouring out of those vehicles and surrounding the house. Bobi Kyagulanyi was alone in the house. Bobi Wine was still in hiding at a location even she didn't know for everyone's safety. Their children had been moved elsewhere as a precaution. And when those soldiers burst through the doors, when they kicked in locks and stormed through rooms, demanding to know where her husband was, she made a decision that took extraordinary courage. According to Bobi's own account given to reporters and published by multiple media outlets the next day, she told the soldiers she didn't know where her husband was, which was likely true since the security protocol they'd established meant Bobi Wine didn't share his exact location even with family. And when the soldiers demanded that she unlock her mobile phone so they could search through her contacts, her messages, her call logs, anything that might give them a lead on where to find Bobi Wine, she refused. She understood that her phone contained information that could lead them directly to Bobi Wine and endanger everyone in their network of supporters. She understood that her contacts list included activists and opposition members who would immediately become targets, and she chose to protect all those people even though she knew exactly what would happen next. And this is when the violence started, when these soldiers armed with automatic weapons, trained in military tactics, wearing the uniform of Uganda's defense forces, decided to punish a woman for refusing to betray her husband. The details of what happened next come directly from Bobi's testimony given from her hospital bed to journalists, come from medical records that documented her injuries, come from neighbors who heard her screaming and saw parts of what happened. One of the gunmen grabbed her by the hair, yanked her across the room with such force that she stumbled and fell, then deliberately banged her head against a concrete pillar. When she tried to resist, when she fought back despite being outnumbered, 4 men forced her to the ground, pinned her down by her arms and legs, and sat on top of her while she struggled to breathe under their weight. They tore at her clothing during the struggle. They continued interrogating her while she was pinned helpless on the floor of her own home, demanding over and over, "Where is your husband? Who is helping him hide? What are his plans?" And she kept refusing to answer, kept protecting him, even as the violence continued. And they didn't stop until she passed out from the combination of head trauma, physical exhaustion, and psychological shock. Neighbors who witnessed parts of the raid reported hearing Bobi screaming, hearing the soldiers shouting, seeing the military vehicles surrounding the compound, and being too terrified to intervene because everyone in that neighborhood knew these were Muhoozi's forces, and crossing them could mean death. This is how state terror works. This is how authoritarian regimes maintain control, not just by victimizing specific targets, but by making everyone else too afraid to help, too afraid to witness, too afraid to speak out. At 1 a.m., after Bobi regained consciousness, she was taken to Nsambya Hospital in Kampala, where doctors treated her for bruises covering multiple parts of her body, head trauma from being slammed against the pillar, and psychological shock. And when she spoke to the media the following day, still in the hospital, visibly injured with bruises evident on her face and arms, but defiant, Bobi Kyagulanyi stated clearly who she believed was responsible. She said she believed General Muhoozi Kainerugaba ordered this attack, following his repeated public threats against her husband. Hit that like button right now if you're still with me, because what I'm about to explain next is why this story matters far beyond Uganda's borders, why activists across Africa are watching this situation with growing alarm. So hit like, share this video, and stay with me, because the international response reveals deep divisions about how the world responds to authoritarianism in Africa. Within hours of Bobi's assault becoming public, condemnation started pouring in from human rights organizations, international lawyers, and democracy activists. The United Nations Human Rights Office issued a statement calling for immediate investigations. Amnesty International documented the attack as part of a broader pattern of state violence against opposition figures in Uganda. Commonwealth lawyers condemned the raid and called for accountability. And on social media, the hashtags #StandWithBobiWine and #ProtectBarbie went viral, as millions of people shared the story and demanded accountability. But here's what's also true and deeply frustrating. Despite all that international attention, despite the documented evidence including eyewitness testimony and medical records, despite Bobi's public statement naming Muhoozi as responsible, there have been no arrests, no investigations announced by Uganda's government, no accountability whatsoever for the soldiers who invaded that home and assaulted a woman. And Muhoozi Kainerugaba, he continued posting on social media, his account remained active, his position as Chief of Defense Forces unchanged, his threats against Bobi Wine continuing, and he faced absolutely zero consequences. In the days following the assault, Uganda's police spokesman issued a carefully worded statement, saying that Bobi Wine was not officially wanted, and was free to return home. But multiple sources reported that security forces continued searching for him, that checkpoints were set up across Kampala, that people suspected of helping him hide were being questioned and detained, and that despite the statement, Muhoozi's forces made it clear the hunt was far from over. As of early February 2026, Bobi Wine remains in hiding, unable to visit his wife while she recovers, unable to see his children, unable to move freely in his own country, facing the daily reality that Uganda's most powerful military family has marked him for elimination. Now I want to address something that's been circulating on social media, because it's important to separate fact from fiction. You may have seen videos or posts claiming that leaders from other African countries, specifically Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, or the Alliance of Sahel States, issued official warnings to Muhoozi, or intervened diplomatically to protect Bobi Wine. I've investigated these claims thoroughly, and I need to tell you the truth. There is no credible evidence that any such official intervention occurred. Some of those videos were confirmed to be AI-generated content, deepfakes that used Ibrahim Traore's image to create fictional statements he never made. I'm telling you this because our credibility matters. The real story of what happened to Bobi Wine and Barbie is horrifying enough without adding fictional elements, and when we spread unverified claims, we actually make it easier for authoritarian governments to dismiss all criticism as fake news. So let's focus on what we can prove, what's documented, what's undeniable, because the truth is powerful enough, and maintaining our credibility is essential for the long-term struggle. Subscribe to this channel right now because this story is far from over, because Bobi Wine's struggle continues, because Uganda's battle for democracy is entering a critical phase, and because across Africa there are dozens of similar struggles happening. So subscribe and stay updated because I'll be following every development, providing verified information as events unfold, and I need you to help spread this information because movements are built on truth, not fiction, because awareness creates pressure and pressure creates change. So what happens next? That's the question everyone is asking. Bobi Wine remains in hiding as of February 2026, but according to sources close to him, he's not backing down, he's not giving up, he's not leaving the country, which would be the easiest solution, but would mean abandoning millions of Ugandans who believe in his vision. His National Unity Platform party continues organizing despite harassment, documenting electoral fraud, planning for whatever comes next. Barbie Kyagulanyi, despite her injuries and trauma, has been speaking to media outlets demanding justice and refusing to be silenced. She's become a symbol in her own right, not just as Bobi Wine's wife, but as someone who stood up to military power, who protected her husband at great personal cost, who continues speaking truth, even though it makes her a continued target. And her courage has resonated across Uganda, especially with women who see in her story their own experiences of state violence. And across Uganda, especially among young people, who represent the overwhelming majority of the population, anger is building at a political system that offers them no voice, no opportunity, no hope for change, through legitimate means. Uganda has one of the youngest populations in the world with a median age around 16 years, which means the vast majority have never known any president except Museveni, who has ruled since 1986, and these young people are watching what happened to Bobi Wine and Barbie and understanding exactly what the current system offers them, which is violence and fear, instead of opportunity and dignity. The broader question is whether Uganda's international partners will take any meaningful action. Uganda receives significant foreign aid and military cooperation from Western governments, who have viewed Museveni as a stabilizing force despite the authoritarian nature of his rule. But maintaining that position becomes harder when the president's son is publicly threatening to kill opposition leaders, and soldiers are assaulting women in their homes. Some analysts believe this incident could mark a turning point where international tolerance finally reaches its limit. Others are more cynical, pointing to decades of similar abuses that were quietly ignored, arguing that nothing will fundamentally change, because geopolitical calculations always win out over human rights concerns. I don't know which prediction will prove correct, but I know the outcome will depend partly on whether people continue paying attention, continue demanding accountability, continue making it politically costly for governments to ignore what's happening. I want to speak now directly to everyone watching. What happened to Barbie Kyagulanyi could happen to any activist, any person who dares to challenge entrenched power in countries where military dynasties believe they own the state. The specific details change from country to country, but the pattern is the same: threaten, isolate, attack, and assume there will be no consequences because there never have been before. But here's what gives me hope. These tactics are becoming less effective with each generation. When Museveni took power in 1986, information moved slowly, abuses could be hidden, international attention was difficult to mobilize. Today Barbie's assault was documented in real time, shared globally within hours, and created a permanent record that can't be erased. Muhoozi's threats are preserved in screenshots that will follow him forever. The witnesses can share their testimony worldwide. Young Ugandans can coordinate and organize in ways previous generations couldn't. And this creates a different environment for authoritarian rule. Not one where it's impossible, but one where it's harder, where it requires constant violence, that becomes increasingly visible and costly. Share this video everywhere right now. Post it to every platform. Send it to everyone you know. Because the story of Bobi Wine and Barbie is being told right now. The narrative is being shaped. And we need to make sure the truth spreads faster than propaganda. That documented facts reach more people than government denials. That their courage inspires others facing similar struggles to keep fighting. My brothers and sisters, Uganda is at a crossroads. Yoweri Museveni is 81 years old. He's been in power for 40 years, and succession is coming. Muhoozi clearly sees himself as the heir, but he faces significant obstacles, including his own impulsiveness, that makes him a liability even to those who benefit from the current system. His public threats against Bobi Wine probably were meant to show strength but revealed weakness, the weakness of someone who can't win through democratic competition and must resort to violence. Within Uganda's military, there are reportedly significant factions uncomfortable with his leadership, worried about international isolation if he becomes president. The next few months will be critical. Will Bobi Wine emerge safely? Will there be accountability? Will international pressure translate into consequences? Will civil society maintain momentum? These are open questions, but this moment will be remembered as significant, as a line crossed, as a level of brutality that may have pushed things to a breaking point. I want to be clear, I am not Ibrahim Traore, and I'm not speaking on behalf of any government. I'm an independent analyst trying to document what's happening, trying to give you verified facts so you can make informed judgments. If you value this content, if you want deep dive analysis based on documented evidence, then subscribe, turn on notifications, share these videos, and join this community because we're building something important, a space where we can discuss these issues honestly without propaganda from any side. The story of Bobi Wine is about something bigger than one man or one election. It's about whether democracy can take root in countries that have only known authoritarian rule, whether military dynasties will allow peaceful transitions, whether young Africans demanding accountability will be heard or silenced, and whether the international community will support democratic movements consistently. These are fundamental questions about Africa's future, about what kind of continent we're building. I don't have all the answers, and I'm suspicious of anyone who claims they do. But I know this: the courage Bobi showed on January 23rd when she refused to betray her husband despite the soldiers and guns and violence, that courage is real and powerful, and it's being replicated by thousands of activists who face similar risks every day. And the determination Bobi Wine shows by continuing despite death threats and manhunts and separation from family, that determination represents the aspirations of millions of young people who want something different, who refuse to believe authoritarian rule is inevitable, who understand change is possible if enough people fight for it. This is the fight that defines our era in African politics, not empty speeches about Pan-Africanism, not military parades or development promises that never materialize, but the actual struggle between systems demanding accountability and systems ruling through fear, between leaders earning legitimacy through service and leaders inheriting power through family connections, between a future shaped by democratic choice and a future imposed by military force. This fight is happening right now in Uganda and dozens of other countries, and the outcome is not predetermined. It will be decided by the actions of people like Bobi Wine and Barbie, and millions of activists who refuse to give up. Share this video right now, make sure everyone sees it. Make sure this story doesn't get forgotten, and stay informed because this is still unfolding. Bobi Wine is still in hiding. Barbie is recovering. Muhoozi remains army chief, and Uganda's future hangs in the balance. Subscribe so you can follow every development. Join us in the comments, and let's continue this conversation because understanding Uganda helps us understand what's happening across the continent, and that understanding is the first step toward change. May Barbie heal fully. May Bobi Wine stay safe. May the soldiers who committed this assault face justice, and may Uganda's young people see the democracy they deserve. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being part of this community that believes African democracy is worth fighting for. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue following this story and other critical developments because this is just one battle in a much larger struggle that will define our continent's future.